we're kicking things off with what we're calling the CIO Speaks. And it's a view into what we're hearing from enterprises around their use of communication services and with 5G. So I think that we all know how important connectivity is to the enterprise. But I think we also know that unless we actually understand what those enterprises, what those verticals need, this idea of build it and they will come just doesn't make sense. We have to fully understand what those enterprises need, how they're using technologies, who's using them, why, to actually take advantage of that opportunity. So I'm going to go through a bit of what my team did to understand that, and then we'll get you onto the Private Wireless Summit. So for those of you who don't know, GSMA Intelligence, we're the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. It means that I'm lucky enough to lead a team of really curious, smart analysts trying to understand what's going on in the telecoms and comms landscape. We work with operators, you might guess that, great access to operators around the world, really trying to help execute on the opportunities. How do we take advantage of everything that you can get from mobility, extend that out for operators' sake, but for societies and enterprises? If you're a customer, thanks. If not, reach out if you like any of this. This is some research that we have. Always love to engage with people around it. So how many people remember the early days of 5G use cases? When we all sat in conference rooms and we all heard about what we were going to do with 5G, and what we heard was this was going to be a great technology for enabling, obviously, new layers of mobile broadband, but really connecting enterprise, right? Reaching out to more IoT, low latency, critical communications. That was the vision, right? And a big chunk of that was around enterprise, right? Low latency, IoT, that was the huge value prop. This was going to be the opportunity, the technology that would allow us to not just support consumers, but enterprises. Huge new market for telcos. Success-wise, right? We've heard 5G has been a success. And to some extent, it really has. If you look at it, and we get queried early on, like people say it's growing so fast, is this really been a success? And if you look at the adoption numbers, yeah, the adoption market numbers show that, right? Quarter past quarter, it's blowing away 3G, 4G in terms of mobile broadband. Most quickly adopted technology. But that doesn't mean anything if we're talking about a technology that was meant to grow revenues for operators. And what do we see? Well, this is a snapshot of just one market, right? I mean, a whole bunch of them. Obviously, it's not all of the countries in the world. But if you look across countries and you compare ARPU change versus traffic change, that's probably not too surprising for you, right? ARPU has barely budged. It's either gone down or barely gone up, whereas traffic has increased a lot. Now, the good news is, without 5G, we probably would not have been able to support that data traffic. 5G has been a success, but clearly has not been a success in terms of growing revenues for operators. So, question is, how do we actually penetrate that B2B opportunity? Right? We know operators have spent a lot of money building out these 5G networks, improving their 4G networks. We've got to find some way to monetize that. How are we going to do it? Right? How are we going to actually look at B2B, figuring out how do we make money from it? So we asked that question, and what my team did is we went out, we reached out to enterprises around the world. Big survey, really one of the biggest of its kind. And we tried to understand across these 4,200 enterprise decision makers, 10 different industries, 21 countries, you see the countries, you see that it's there. We really tried to understand a few things, right? What were they doing in terms of digital transformation? What were their strategies? How much do they care about it? What are they spending? How are they looking at technologies? How are they thinking about suppliers? Now, this is a big piece of research. I encourage you, if this looks interesting, please engage with me afterwards. We'd love to share some of the insights because we don't have time to go into all of it, but I want to go into a few points, which I think are particularly important, and will hopefully set us up for a great conversation following this in terms of the private 5G, private network summit. So one of the things we asked here is really the question of who cares the most, right? From a vertical perspective, if you're looking at all the different industries out there, who's most likely to take advantage of these technologies? And we looked at this on two different angles. Right? I talked about the ways we looked at it in terms of strategy, in terms of spending, and I think spending and use of technology were the two things that we thought differentiated as you're trying to figure out who to look at, who to tackle, right? And so what do you see? I mean, use of technology is pretty solid across most of the verticals. Spending differs up and down, right? What you get out of this is probably fintech, utilities, media, and entertainment stand out. But where this really looks interesting is when you plot it like this. When you plot it like this and you look at the spending on digital transformation versus use of technologies, you see that upper right quadrant, right? That's where you see the media and entertainment folks, financial services, utilities, and energy. There's a lot of great examples of that. Anyone here going to the DevCon focusing at some of the telco API stuff? Well, if you aren't, I really encourage you to. Really exciting to see how enterprise verticals taking advantage telco network APIs. What do you see there? You see a lot of great fintech use cases. They understand the value leveraging those technologies. Obviously, we can see the value of media and entertainment, utilities as well. So let's look at this in a few ways. We're obviously here in the US. I assume many of you might be from the US. And so I wanted to look at this in terms of how can we look at the data from the survey from a global perspective versus US perspective. And just a moment here, I think one of the things, if you're ever looking for research out there and you're trying to understand a market, you'll see tons of surveys. You'll see all sorts of data out there. One of the things that always kills me and my team is that you can call yourself a survey, but it doesn't mean anything. There's a survey of 10 people, 100 people, decision makers. So when we go out and we do a survey, we spend the money to reach out to 4,200 enterprises around the world across different industries. It's so we can actually get something representative. So we can say, how does this vertical compare to another? How does this region? It allows us to say things like this: where does the US fit in compared to other markets? And we see it's fairly well ahead, right? Use of technology, how they plan to go ahead with digital transformation, how they're spending. Good news for all of you guys looking at those markets. So the question then, though, is when we think about this, what do actually enterprises want? Because we can ask who's spending, we can ask the verticals that you should be targeting. The question is, what are they actually looking to get out of the use of these technologies? Great, they're using them. What are they going to do with it? You find something that, and I think we see this probably across most industries, making money beats saving money. I was told early on in my career, businesses do things for really only one of two reasons, either to make money or save money. The reality is regulation fits in there as well. But if we look at that, we can see that playing out here, right? Growing revenues, enhancing customer experience, strengthening their competitive position, those are what they're looking to the use of these technologies for. Obviously, it's following things like improving business agility, regulation, reducing costs, but it is how you actually use that to help those enterprises improve their businesses, grow their businesses. Now, we can look at this then compared to the US, and it's pretty similar, right? You see some changes there. Saving money comes out a little bit higher, right? You see those are the rankings there on the side, but still growing revenue at the top. And then you see sort of maybe a bit of a switching there. Message, focus on the US. Maybe the savings part is a little bit more important as part of that message. Make sure you play to it. So of course, there is the question of how will this get funded? We showed that earlier, right? How much enterprises plan to spend, who's going to be spending on digital transformation. You see this play out here, and you see these numbers, again, showing the US compared to everyone else. And the US kind of, again, comes out fairly well. The big key, though, is that spending, and you're seeing that in 27 to 30, across every single industry, higher, right? There is this expectation, the technologies you're all here to talk about, to help enterprises with, that spending is going to be going up across every single industry. Good news. Of course, we can talk about technologies more broadly. We're here to understand 5G. We understand that 5G has a huge role to play in terms of digital transformation. Here's the question of, really, what do we think is important? What do enterprises want from 5G, right? How are different 5G capabilities important or not to an enterprise's digital transformation? And here you see some Some things that probably aren't too surprising. Enhanced connectivity. Is that a function of what 5G can do, of what they know about 5G? Don't know. Connectivity is always going to be near the top of what they expect to get from 5G, but probably more surprising is that security side of things. If there's something that you've seen here in terms of a trend, the importance of security. Enterprises get the value of 5G in terms of being more secure. They understand the importance of security to their businesses going forward. It's why you see that there. Now again, this sort of trails off there, but I'd say the last two things to call out, cloud, not surprising. Does anyone not know that sort of cloud is how enterprises are doing business more and more? I think we all get that. And as I said, a great lead into what you'll be hearing next, this focus on private wireless networks. Again, we can look at how the US ranks, fairly similar. A little bit of changes there towards the bottom, top four, the same. These are the messages for your customers, for your prospects in the enterprise as you're going to sell them on this. We can then look at this in terms of network APIs, and I mentioned this before, right? The use of APIs to tap into telco network capabilities. And this is particularly important. If you don't understand this, lots of great information here at the conference this week. But what we see here is that there's a huge opportunity for enterprises to leverage those capabilities for their businesses. And what do we see there? I mentioned security. Not too surprising then, fraud prevention #1. Globally, it's more about network performance optimization. But after that, we still see some fairly common demands, right? How do you optimize your network? How do you prevent fraud? How do you actually integrate with payments? Again, these are the things that your customers want. So I do think in the last couple minutes I have left here, beyond all the work that we did to understand enterprises, as I mentioned, research and consulting around the GSMA, great relationships with operators around the world. So we connect with them on a regular basis to try to understand how they are trying to serve the enterprise segment. And so we asked last year, in the process of doing it again this year, what are their priorities, right? What do they think is critical to delivering for B2B success? Right? How are the telcos trying to align with what they think the enterprises need? Again, not too surprising, connectivity comes out on top. Is that good or bad? I think maybe we focus more on connectivity versus what it can deliver, but then that's why we see the delivery of cloud services there, IoT services. Pretty well aligned, which is a good thing. It's just how do we execute on it? And of course, private wireless. That's why we're here before the Private Wireless Summit. That's why I think it's such an important fact that we're talking about private wireless, because that's critical for enterprises. The operators get it. Now I figure out how to make that connection. So I said I was only going to take up 15 minutes. We've only got about 1 minute 30 left. So I really want to bring this to a close to say, well, what does this mean? Right? And depending on who you are, it means a few things. Right? If you're supplying into these folks, follow that demand side of things. You saw the verticals that want this. Look at those as your targets. Make sure you're talking to those that don't get it, that they understand what they can do with these technologies, right? And of course, make sure you're linking connectivity. It's what they want to things like security, things like cloud. That's also what they want. Focus on the top line. We see it's what enterprises want, but make sure you also have that bottom line story in there, because saving money is important, particularly in the US. And then I think if you're out there and you're working with telcos, help them help themselves. They see that connection. They're going to need some help actually reaching out to the verticals. Now, this is not just a cut and paste mistake here for operators. It's much the same message for operators. Right? Follow the demand, help educate the market, link connectivity there, right? Help yourself, right? Do what you know you can do, reach out to your suppliers. Last, if you're an enterprise CIO and you're here, one, thank you. We really appreciate having you here. And I think there's a few messages. Leverage the industry's interest in 5G. Right? The industry wants to drive 5G into your business. Use that as an opportunity to work with them to figure out how you can leverage that. Right? Think about 5G beyond connectivity, what you can do with it. And then, of course, look to security. You're already doing that. But most importantly, because I think this is really key, again, talk to the API side of things. It's going to be critical. We're doing great things. And I would say, huge opportunity. If you're here, again, thank you. Huge opportunity to learn about that. With that said, I didn't have a chance to that. If you really want to understand what I was trying to talk about frenemies, reach out later. But I'm going to get kicked off the stage. So thank you all very much. any that's interesting, please reach out. And I'm going to hand over to the Private Network Summit. Thank you, guys.